So hello, I am Dan Milinazzo. If any of you were at the Lowell meetup at Thorndike Exchange, I think back in October of last year, I presented this, but I'll dive into a little bit of what I've done since then, just to touch on that. But a little bit about me, my background is I have a heavy construction background. I do a lot of construction work, grew up in the trades, my father's a roofer. So I did that growing up, and then I joined an architecture firm, worked there for a little bit. Then I joined a building envelope consulting firm, doing design work on building envelopes, siding, windows, roof stacks, things like that. And then after that, I joined a multifamily real estate investment trust, which is where I'm at right now. I did take a 2-year sabbatical somewhere in there to join a GC firm that I had known for about 20 years. They brought me on, they're a building envelope contractor, so again, I kind of went more into the construction side. But I came back to the multifamily REIT, which is again where I'm at right now. So I went to school for architecture, decided I wasn't going to be an architect. I couldn't draw the prettiest of pictures, but I could make sure my building stood up. So I thought engineering is more where my skills were. And then I actually went back to school for my master's in construction management. So I started in the real estate game. In 2009, I bought a 2-family in Lowell, as the market was not so great, but it was a short sale, got it for a good deal, and I lived there, fixed it up, and still own that today. And I can honestly say I completed a BRRRR. It took me about 10 years, but I did BRRRR the property. Right? It's about double the value I paid for it, so that's what the market does for you if you're in it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my first flip, and this is a deal that came to me. I had been working with the Camdor Group for a while, looking at deals. I dragged John through, I don't even know how many properties, but I drug him through a lot of properties that weren't quite the right fit. And then one night I just got a text from Matt Perimian about a property in Gardner, and I was like, I don't really like that area, it's too far away, but tell me a little bit about it. So he gave me an idea as to what the ARV would be, which is probably the most critical thing you want to get comfortable with if you're going to try to flip something. And so I grabbed that information, I vetted it a little bit, got comfortable that ARV sounds about right. They were listing it for $109.9, and the ARV being $225. I mean, you're talking 50% of the value. And I was like, yeah, let's just put an offer in. I want to see it right now. And then I was told I can't. They don't want anybody looking at the property. It's like, well, why would you list it then if you don't want me to see it? And I want to lock it up before somebody else catches wind of it, because it had been on the market for a couple hours before I got wind of it. So I said, never mind, just put an offer in. Put an offer in at the asking price. No questions, no inspection, nothing. Cash offer. And that's probably a stupid move if it's the first deal you look at. However, all I had to go on was that photo and a really bad Google Street View, and this little description, which, yeah, there was an apple orchard or something in the back. Well, apple, pear, and walnut tree. Sold. I'll take 2 of them. But it wasn't my first deal, or my first offer, let's say. So, I mean, I had looked at almost 100 different leads that came through, mostly MLS. Some of these leads came through wholesalers, and after I got those leads, I knocked out almost half of them that they just weren't what I was looking for. I was really in the market for a BRRRR. I wanted to find something, fix it, and then keep it as cash flow. Cash flow was my end game. So I intended to keep this thing. I analyzed about 32, and I eventually got down to 1 closed deal in 2020. So 84 leads to 1 deal was my ratio. Not so great, but again, it was my first year kind of being intentional about the property since 2009 when I bought my duplex. So to calm my nerves a little bit, it is nervous to pull the trigger, especially never being able to see the property. I saw the property at night in the dark with the most expensive, brightest flashlight I could get out of Home Depot right down the street. I needed something because I knew I wouldn't be able to see it. But I knew that after walking it, I'd have a lot of exits on it. I could BRRRR it, which was my original goal. I could just flip the thing, or I could ripcord, which this was my trademark, right? If anybody hears ripcord in the real estate game, you heard it here, second technically, because I dropped this back in October before. But I had multiple exits, and that's obviously everyone's first rule is if you're going to get into it, make sure you have multiple exits so you can get out if you feel that you're in trouble. So there were multiple levels that I could just clean this house out and then I can get rid of it. And trust me, that was an investment. I went through, I think, 7 dumpsters on this deal. The same family had lived in this house generation to generation since 1870, I believe. And I have some of the silver and coins and stamps to prove it.
They had some cool instruments too.
What's that?
They had some cool instruments.
Oh yes.
Record players and
Yeah,
stuff.
they had some really nice like old 20s records players and typewriters. I mean, there's a lot of good jewels that came out of this property, and I think every one of my family members, because it was my first flip and I'd been telling them for 20 years I was going to flip something, they all came and looked at this thing, and they all went home with at least 1 or 2 mementos. My father has his shelf over his fireplace is like these old cast iron pencil sharpeners. I've never seen them. But if you price them on eBay, which trust me, I did. I almost priced everything in that house on eBay. I made like $700 auctioning it off because I realized selling things individually, that's a way to really get in your own way, trying to get a deal done. With all the crap I was taking out of there and then trying to sell them one by one and meeting people and them not liking it and people looking at the silverware and trying to find out, is it real silver or is it not silver? Is it stainless? So I was like, never mind. Brought it to an auction house in town. They took an entire truckload of that stuff and they gave me back $600. Not too bad. They made like 300 on it, so it worked out. So I had a lot of exits, especially with that ARV, buying it at 50% of the value. There was room. I could pull out anytime after I was getting a little uncomfortable if the market changed or if I felt I put too much of my own money into it. And you know, you might think, oh, I'm walking around $110,000 in my pocket. And I wasn't. Cash, in my terms, was my HELOC of my BRRRR that I refinanced, got some cash out of it, and then I did a HELOC on the rest of it because if you wait 10 years, property's going to go up quite a bit in value. So I took as much of that as I could and I dumped it into this. This was the very first, if anyone's familiar with Bigger Pockets, this was the very first calculator I did on it, which was in November, right after I made the offer. And based on just loose numbers, I had a decent sense as to where I'd be, about 50 grand in repairs. Figured I'd rehab it in about 6 months and refinance it and I'd be good. And I would cash flow. It wouldn't be a screamer of a deal, but the cash flow would be there at the end, ultimately, and that's what I was looking for. This is just, yeah, sorry for the formatting, but this is what it looks like, but it does it absolutely no justice. I had already cleaned out some of the kitchen here, but it stunk to high heaven. I mean, there's a hole in that sink right there, and people were still using it. Don't know where that water was going. Well, actually, I do, because I had to rip out the floor right there. But the odor in the second floor apartment was the worst, because the person must have smoked 5 or 6 packs a day. It was bad. I mean, I paid a guy to try to scrub the walls. That was like painstaking. I had to give him a bonus because he worked so hard and didn't really get anything done. So I eventually had to stain it, ozone machine. I did everything I could in there, and I spent way more on trying to make this look like a unit that didn't have a smoker in it for 40 years. And I think I did a good job at it. But for the most part, everything I was doing, you really can't tell, but everything I was going to do to this place was going to be cosmetic. The only thing that wasn't was I found knob and tube wiring. Now, I consulted with my real estate rock stars, and they said it's the market in this area. You're going to find properties with knob and tube. Don't kill the deal over it. So I was like, all right, fine. But then I thought more about it. I lost sleep over it. Again, my goal was to hold this property. And I did not want to hold a property that had knob and tube. So I was like, I have to do something about it. Because if I am going to put somebody in this house, I want to make sure that the knob and tube is gone. So I ripped all the knob and tube out of this house, which was more than I originally budgeted for, but it was the right move. And I mean, the finished product, I think, came out pretty decent. It was a 2-bed on the first floor unit and a 1-bed on the second floor. But what I ended up doing was the layout of this house, again, it was an older house, and the layout of this house technically had 2 living rooms, which you don't really need 2 living rooms. So it was very easy, because I had doorways on both sides, to just cordon that off and make that a 3rd bedroom, which again only helped on the BRRRR model. right? It would have been able to generate more rent, so it seemed like it was a really good deal. And I thought after I looked at the finishes that I had done, that it was in decent shape. I was trying to see where the market was value-wise at this point, and talking to Matt Permian, who actually was my agent when I bought it, he basically told me, you want to boost the value, put a good shower head in it, and then what else? I put a deck. Well, there's a roof on the back, and I put rubber pavers down on that roof because the prior owner had just kind of, I don't know, danced out there with high heels or something. It was really bad. Don't walk on a rubber roof with high heels, just in case any of you guys want to do that. So I had to replace that roof. But I did put down a nice thick paver, which added to that second floor unit where, yeah, it's a one bedroom, but now you have this nice outdoor space. And again, if you remember from the description, it had an apple, pear, and a walnut tree in the back. So you can go out there and see the apples and the pears growing and just enjoy life. So it all worked out on the finished side. I thought I was pretty good. And then I was really curious as to, all right, where's the market going right now? And in the time that I was in it, I was just getting more and more comfortable that my ARV was solid, rock solid. I was good. So I was like, all right, we're definitely there. We're going to be all right. So some of the good stuff that came from, like I said, I converted a 2-bed into a 3-bed, which only really helps on if I was going to hold it for rental or if I was going to turn around and sell it. Added that bonus roof deck, all new wiring. I did try to go through Mass Save at the time because this house was lacking in sufficient insulation. Again, it was built in the 1870s. So it was a little older, needed some insulation to really help. But I knew I could take advantage of Mass Save, but when I tried to call them, they were so backlogged that they just couldn't work in my time. And I was like, I can't hold on to this thing and burn through the debt on it and risk the market changing and all that stuff. And the good thing is, because I had all the wiring done on permit and signed off, that Mass Save could now come into this property and insulate it for the next buyer. So now it's a selling feature. Now it's something that the next buyer can take advantage of. I did mention that the vintage stuff, which I do have a mink coat still in my attic. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. It doesn't fit, but I've never seen one.
Call me Peter.
It's not real mink. But the best thing that came from it was the experience. For years, I had been telling everyone, because of my background in construction, that I can flip, I'm going to do it, I'm going to eventually get this done. And after putting in the reps, doing the calcs over and over again, and working with a good team that wasn't going to lead me astray, I felt confident to pull the trigger here, and I gained the experience. I did get a little nervous because we had some old plumbing valves in there. I did get hit with a bill from National Grid because they said that I was using electricity, and I wasn't on the 1 meter that was there. And then they sent me a collection notice. I'm like, I've been trying to reach out to you, tell you that I have this property and put it in my name. So I had to get caught up in about 6 months of National Grid bills. The other thing was, like I said, the property, 1880, 1870, very, very cold winter, oil heater, and no insulation. I didn't quite factor my heating bills into the flip. I did make sure, the very first thing I did was I made sure that heater worked. I found the local expert, brought him up there, and he raved about that system. He's like, oh, this is beautiful, just been neglected. Spent a couple grand fixing it up, and I was like, great, perfect. And then I found out exactly how inefficient the property was when I started getting oil tank after oil tank after oil tank after oil tank. And then I got to the point where I hired a GC to do a lot of the work, just because I knew my biggest issue on this was getting myself out of the way. I can do the work that I hired these guys to do, but that wasn't scalable. It's not something I can do. I have a full-time job. So I couldn't get down there and do all that. So I had to hire it out. So I did, but then it came to the little things. Going out there and dealing with the windows or something like that, and my contractor started to burn out because both he and I are from an hour 15, hour and a half away. And he flat out said, once I get this thing done, don't ever call me for a property over there ever again. So I heard that, and then I decided, all right, I'm going to burn some nights, burn some weekends. I'm going to go down and do some of the work myself because I felt that I was skilled enough to do so. I must have changed a plumbing shutoff valve about 7 times until I finally just gave up on it and got it to settle by changing it out completely as opposed to repairing it. Another thing that kind of burned me on this was we had an issue with an appliance. I bought brand new appliances, and one of the refrigerators decided to crap out. And so during the home inspection, the fridge was dead. And I was like, no problem, it's under warranty. I'll make a call and I'll get it taken care of for you. Sounded like it was gonna be that fast. Months went by, didn't quite happen. Then we were back and forth trying to work it out with the buyer. There was a little bit of a hold back on it because I swore I'm gonna take care of it, the fridge is under warranty, everything's fine. And then trying to communicate to Frigidaire that their tech that they sent out said the fridge was crap, needed to be fully replaced, and they just wouldn't believe it. They said, no, there's a form they have to fill out, they have to go through this. And I said, I have someone literally living there now, and you're saying that I can't get a fridge there. So ultimately, trying to work it out with the buyer got frustrated, and I talked with John, because I knew John was now, as I was exiting the Gardner market, he was entering. And I was like, dude, I have a fridge, like, just hang on to the dead fridge, and they'll do a replacement for you, and just, I gotta get out of that property. Hemmed and hawed a little bit, and he said, all right, fine, we'll go ahead and take care of that. So he sent somebody over there. The fridge was no longer in the house. It was out in the trash, taken apart. And I'm like, well, that's your ass, I'm not paying for it now. I mean, you just disassembled it. Now there's absolutely no value. But eventually I did pay the full price of that fridge. So I paid for the fridge twice, is what it comes down to. Paid for it, didn't work, they threw it out, and then I paid them again because the fridge didn't work. So I covered that, but it was a little frustrating. And I got stuck in that habit of, when is good enough, good enough? I kept going back, kept doing little things, and I thought, that's it. I'm at the point where I can go in, do a quick brush, and I had like John on the phone, because John was actually going to be selling it. Candor Group was going to sell it for me. And I show up, oh man, this was much more impressive when it showed up like a PowerPoint and slid in.
It's a PDF.
So it's a little hard to see. But that big red letter, if anybody's familiar with it, is not something you want to see on a project that you're working on. That means the city's not happy with you, and they want you to stop work immediately. So I was going down there to basically just fluff it and hand it off. And I got that stop work order. So of course I was like, well, that just took the wind out of my sails, so I'm leaving. So I went home, called them on Monday, tried to figure out what the issue was, and it came down to these front stairs. So the front stairs that were in place when I bought it, I nearly died walking up the stairs because they literally put plywood on that top. And I went halfway through the thing. And I was like, I can't run a project through the winter with stairs like this. So I told my guys, take them out, we're gonna rebuild them exactly where they are. Use all the existing size and everything like that. So they tore them out. Very first thing they did was tear them out. And they put a dumpster in the yard. And then I start finding out as I'm bringing contractors through that the township is somewhat notorious for driving areas, looking for dumpsters, and then watching you. Say, well, that house doesn't have a permit, yet there's a dumpster. And I'm sure at some point somebody poked their head in the dumpster and found out that we were literally just throwing out almost 100 years of stuff, and not construction stuff, just personal property. And so that was fine until the very last minute when they came out and they shot me down because those stairs were open riser. So I had a conversation with them. He immediately called me out as, well, you're a flipper, you should know better. But I said, I'm not a flipper. Like, it's a two-family. I just want to close this thing out, and I may just as easily rent the thing out. It's like, great, so you're a landlord. Regardless of how you slice it, you're a business. You're not living there. So you don't get that little, exclusion of a homeowner where, yeah, you can do a couple things and we're not going to come down hard on you. This is a business for you. You need to take care of it the right way. So I tried to reason. I don't think he wanted to hear anything I had to say, so I had to hand this off to my contractor, who could basically bash me to the building department, and they could get on the same page that everybody hates me. Let's just make this thing go away. So I had to tear out those stairs, rebuild them again, and that took me probably about a month and a half. After that month and a half, he came out finally to sign off on it, and as he was walking away, he said, oh yeah, what about the back stairs? And I'm like, are you shitting me? Like, you just got this signed off, like, can we just be done? And he's like, no, those stairs are not compliant because you changed the railings. And I'm like, well, they were falling apart, I just changed the railing. I figured that'd be a good thing. He said, no, you changed enough of it, now you have to bring it up to code. And I'm like, all right, fine, I will bring it up to code. He says, oh, by the way, you need a landing. And I'm like, why do I need a landing? It goes into a porch. I could just as easily take the door off, and now the open porch is my landing. His interpretation of the code was very different than my own interpretation. And at that point, I figured it's not worth fighting it. But then he tells me, when you put that landing on, you are now non-conforming. You are already a non-conforming property, so if you change your footprint at all, you have to go in front of zoning. And I was like, yeah, sure, I got 30 to 60 days to, just putt around. Again, after a little bit of me and him not getting along so much, my contractor stepped in, badmouthed me a little bit to the guy, and they agreed that we'll just make this thing go away, and the contractor can take advantage of me on another deal somewhere down the road, and everybody be happy. So he signed off on those stairs, and we were in good shape. And then he asked me about these front steps, which I don't know if you can tell, that's not what new concrete looks like. And he was trying to hold me to the tread height differences, the riser height differences on those stairs. And I was like, I had nothing to do with those stairs. They're probably 50 years old. I didn't do that. But again, at that point, I think he was just having fun. Nothing inside was like permittable other than the electric, which had a permit. It was signed off. Everything was good. So he had to find something on the outside of the house, which we gave him. We gave him something to see. So all in all, this whole stop work order and all that stuff cost me about 3 months, which in the flipping world that I've been around for a little bit now, talking to some people, that could very easily kill deals. 3 months of extra carrying costs. I mean, you might as well just sign it off right now and just walk away with the lesson that you learned. The good news was, this was the end of 2021 that I ended up selling it. Well, early fall of 2021, and the market was just going crazy. And I was like, okay. So I actually wanted to, after all this, turn around and send the building inspector a nice bottle of whiskey or something like that, because he actually made me a shit ton more money. Because it took me 3 months and I got to ride that wave with the market coming up. So it worked out pretty good there. And again, this is more impressive if you go back and watch the other one I did. But I bought it for 110, and I eventually sold it for 250. So on the surface, the HD TV way, it looks like I made about 75 grand on this deal. But when you really break it down, dealing with the closing costs, the rehab came in a little higher, holding costs, and your concessions, which I did. It was a first-time home buyer. I helped cover some of their closing costs to make the deal work for them, and then obviously I had to kick in for the fridge. So ultimately, I made about $36,000 on this, and it took me about 254 days, which is long in any stretch of the imagination for $36,000. But ultimately, yes, I 100% think it was worth it, because at the end of the day, I had already prepped myself that if I was holding that 225 number, that, yeah, there's a good chance I'm going to lose a little bit. But thankfully, things didn't work that way. And I had already wrapped my head around the fact that even if I lost some money on this particular deal, you don't actually realize that you've lost the money unless you quit. Let it take you out of the game, that's it. Well, yeah, now that's a realized loss. If you take money out of the stock market when it's down, you've lost money. On this, I knew that I had gained enough experience. I checked the box, I wanted to do it, and I said, you know what, I'm going to be able to roll this in. Whether I lost or made money, I'd be able to roll those lessons forward and hopefully make money on the next deal. And that's essentially what came of it. Was I did take the profits from that. And this is just kind of how I got to that final number there. But with those profits, I decided I do have some money in the bank now, and now it's time to grow my business, right? I want to try to find more deals, and I was challenged on a regular basis, how many leads do you have coming in? And I could refer back to this, and I could tell you, I had 80 some odd leads to get that one deal. And then I was questioned again, how many leads did you bring in? I'm like, well, I mean, that's it right there, 84. And they said, no, that's MLS doing the work for you. Like, I wasn't actively looking for leads. So I decided, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and launch into direct mail. So after this closed, probably in November of 2021, I started a direct mail campaign with some of the profits from this deal. And on top of that, I was able to get into other deals. syndication wise. Use some of the profits to get into that and kind of spread myself out now, and just see where it goes from here. Take that one profit and split it and grow. And since then, I've sent out, I don't even know how many, probably a couple thousand direct mail letters. And I can honestly say that to date, I've closed on a 4-family, which I closed on it with the Candor Group. And Simplified is going to be managing, or is managing, that property for me. And I have a 6-family under agreement, and that 6-family came from my direct mail. Now, I burned a lot of contacts. I didn't know anything about direct mail. I probably burned through a lot of sellers early on, not knowing how to talk to them. I had a nice script. I was trying to follow all my stuff, and I don't quite think I hit it. And I just burned those guys out. I'm like, well, there goes that deal. I'm not going to get that guy to call me back. But ultimately, I just stayed with it, consistent, persistent, and I eventually did get a 6-family under contract for it, and that works out. And then to the conversation of cost segregation, profits from a syndication sale, you're going to pay taxes on that. Or you buy a 6-family, do a cost seg on it, and now you don't pay the taxes on the profits on the deal. So as long as I keep doing that cycle, I should be in good shape. But it is a lot of work. But again, I think ultimately just reinvesting in yourself and in the business, and continuing forward and surrounding yourself with rockstar agents and team. I mean, I think I've used most of the people that were on the sponsor list at this point. I used Doug for my closings. I used Prime for my insurance. I've been in conversations with Jeff over there. And unfortunately, I can't talk much to Joe because I'm doing deals that are bigger than 4 families, or trying to at least. So I'm in a different world with that. But it's all been worth it. At the end of the day, it's all been worth it. I wish there were more deals, but again, being around the right network, I think, is really where it's all paid off, to just keep going. And so, I mean, I still deal with all these guys, and thank you, Todd, for inviting me on this.
Thanks, Dan.
Any questions? for
Yeah,
me?
I was gonna say, so that's a great first story, Dan. What do we have for questions for Dan?
I have a comment. So I've actually laid eyes on this property. I was there for the photos, I think, and the smoke inspection. So I had no idea what it looked like before. You did a great job.
Well, that is good. If there were remnants, I'd be in trouble.
I had no idea it was in that rough shape. Good job.
Yes, and you got me through the smoke inspection, so thank you.
Yeah, that was another hurdle. God, you would have been like.
See,
crying.
it's all about having the right team, because
Yeah.
there was a missing smoke and Heather was ready.
It was like 90 degrees that day. I'm like pulling ladders out of my car, getting up there. I'm like, hold on, just wait, hold on. It's good, right? And he's like, all right, yeah, it's good.
The best part of, the funniest part of Dan's story to me is how bad the building department busted his chops.
Yes.
And now we like play golf with them.
Right?
And I was invited to do this presentation in Gardner. And I'm like, that's probably not a good idea.
Yeah, the guy comes to our meetup in Gardner now, and he's busting your chops over,
Yeah.
relatively simple.
But again, the difference there is I was not building any type of relationship with the building department, whereas this group
John.
is
Yes.
building a relationship. And so even though in my world, very small world, but I'm telling myself, I'm improving the community. This house has been neglected. Well, you know what? If you don't actually communicate that to anybody, you're only doing it for yourself. And ultimately, the message is that, and you see John and you guys being promoted in that town all the time for just revitalizing a city that is definitely making a comeback.
Yeah, being proactive, and I didn't mean to be, I genuinely think it's funny, but being proactive with municipal departments, building departments is part of our strategy big time. We reach out to people early, because as you know, as I've learned, they can really change, the end result of your project. So, yeah. Any other questions for Dan? Got one over here.
What's the, what kind of list are you directing at?
So I am targeting multifamily. So I targeted about 45 minutes from my house, and I go through list source and I just pull all the data. There are much smarter ways to do it, but I like to do things a little more difficult just because I'm built that way. And I took that list and I wrote it down. I chopped it into multiple pieces. So there's the first list that I mailed was multifamily owners that only have one property and they don't live in it. That was the first list I sent out, and that was, I don't know, maybe about 800 names. And then a secondary tier of that same list was properties that were in the name of a trust, or that the owner had multiple properties. So I considered those like a somewhat more sophisticated owner, where they might not be as motivated as I only have this one property, if you offer me quick cash, I'll get out of your way kind of thing. So that was my message for the first group. The second group was more, as a more professional landlord, what are your headaches that I can help you with? You know what I mean? Using some of the network that I have, you know, can I help make an introduction to a property management company? Can I help get you some construction bids? Can I help you in any other way like that? And that was the second group. And the third group, which I am probably not, I think I sent one direct mail list to them, or mail it to them, but it's getting expensive. My response rate has not been that great on it, so I'm about to shift tactics into a more affordable contact method. But the third list was LLCs. It was all LLCs that I literally tried to scrub myself, which you can definitely do it. Everyone can scrub these lists and get the name and the address of people that own these properties, but it takes a shit ton of time. So it's just as easy to go to Upwork, find somebody that literally their gig that they offer is, I will scrub your LLC list for $90. I'm like, great, here's a list of 600 names. You do the work that I had calculated would take me 40 hours. So they have all the systems and all that stuff. So I was like, yeah, that's a very easy return on investment. So.
Does ListSource, I'm sorry, I didn't want to change the topic yet.
Oh, yeah.
The ListSource, is that your primary like source? Because I know we use like PropStream, there's like Batchlead, Stacker.
Right, which is the smarter way to do it. Because
okay, got it.
you have access to much bigger lists, but I was niching down, so I didn't think I needed the powerhouse that something like that would bring.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna, because originally I told myself I was gonna handwrite these things, and I did, 100 of them, and I said, never again am I gonna handwrite that many letters. And I actually most recently got complimented on my penmanship of my mailer, which I used open letter marketing for, because they used the auto pen. I'm like, sweet. But the person took the time to call me and compliment me on my penmanship, but they're not interested in selling their house.
There's a lot of time there.
Does anyone else direct mail in here?
I have.
Elizabeth has. Anybody else?
I tried it once.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
I've done it for
it's brutal.
It worked in Quincy,
It did work in.
and I hand wrote those envelopes.
Yep.
You can
Without purpose.
actually use your own handwriting and create
Yes.
a font for
Yep.
a template and do
I think it's
mail merge.
Is
So
it calligrapher or something
Yes.
like that? Yes. Yeah. I tried that too.
it's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
It still looks like it's computer, but
Yeah.
a
I
little
like
bit
that.
better.
But then again, I was at that point I was
cool
overcomplicating.
innovation happening
Yeah.
in the space to make
Yes.
it easier.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned those tools, and for anybody that is interested in direct mail, the tools are available to everybody. It's, you nailed it, which is, what are you looking for?
Right.
And somebody once described it to me as, seeking out motivations. I'm seeking seller motivations as to why they would sell their properties. And the more motivations I can stack together,
Yep.
the better off I am. So like, if prices are high and they're going through a life event like a bankruptcy or a divorce, whatever those things are that you want to seek out, don't just blindly pull a list and mail them, because there's 100 other people doing that.
Right.
But if you can get really specific about your criteria and really specific about your seller motivations, you can have some success.
Right, and paying attention to the market. I mean, the sixth family that I have under contract now, literally my mailer, I think, hit that seller right after the news of the Fed rate hike.
I was
And
gonna ask,
they
when
panicked.
so that's under agreement now?
Yes.
Yeah, so we're seeing more success with, if you have been mailing, I know not many people raise their hands, but if you have been, keep mailing,
Yes.
because seller sentiment is changing.
Yes.
Dramatically.
And it's all timing. I just happened to, I didn't know that was gonna happen.
Yeah.
But I had been mailing, and I mean, this guy must have got 7 or 8 letters from me. But ultimately, that's the big takeaway, is everybody that's in that space is you have to be consistent about it. And because everybody does a bunch of letters and they think they're gonna get a quick response. And yeah, I got a lot of responses the very first time, but none of them turned into deals because I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, yeah, I wanna buy your house, I'll give you this much money for it. And they're like, what? No. I was like, okay, cool. And then fast forward, and I record myself. Just for me, I self-audit all of my calls. And I can see that mindset and all that stuff has changed. The way I talk to sellers is changing a little bit, and it's less about I'm going to buy your property. It's more about getting to know the person and just finding that level of connection. The closest deal I got, other than the 6 family that I have under agreement, was because I just was talking to the guy as a human. He's like, you know what? I don't really talk to many people, and I really wasn't that interested, but yeah, I think I'm ready to sell this thing. And I was like, geez, okay, cool. And then 2 months later, he changed his mind. But that's fine. It's fine. It happens. But I will follow up with him because he was interested at one time, and eventually he will be again. So.
Mike, you had a question?
Yeah, when you say like scrub LLC data, like when I was using PropStream for a while, and you'd get like Mechanic Street LLC and no other information. When you say scrub data, are you like talking about giving that list to somebody and they can like figure out who owns it and everything and get all the info?
Yeah,
Okay.
and you can too. I mean, there's all sorts of paid services and things like that,
Yeah.
but the simplest way is, especially in like Massachusetts, is opencorporates.com or .org, I forget what it is. You just type in the LLC name, and most times they'll give you whoever registered that LLC. Sometimes it's under an attorney's name, and if that's the case, you might hit a wall. But if there is an ownership structure on there, and the best ones is when an LLC is owned by an LLC, which is owned by an LLC, which is owned by a C corporation, then you hit a wall. But still, you go a few layers deep, and some of those will turn into contacts, and then you get that name and the address of that person, and you put through a skip tracer, and then you have their phone and maybe their email. Emails I've found has not been that effective, but the phone numbers is what I'm going to be rolling out next. Yeah.
I'm curious, what's the more cost-effective way that you're going to contact them?
I'm going to go into cold calling and SMS. Yeah. And I mean, that's the other thing is, I mean, doing everything yourself because you feel like you can, right? I have a full-time job, and this does not play in well. So I actually started intentionally planning. So every Sunday I have a planning session. I build out my week of, this is my W-2 commitment that I have to put time into my real estate business. And I realized that I wasn't leveraging the right way, right? So then I got a CRM and I got an answering service because I was literally in Universal Studios theme park with my wife, and I told her, I'm not going to take calls, this is just you and I'm going to avoid it. And she takes my phone to like navigate our way through, and I kid you not, 3 phone calls come in back to back to back. Never happened to me. I've never gotten 3 back to back to that. She's like, who are these people? I said, oh, my mailer must have gotten to them already. She's like, this is for the mails that you're sending out? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, do you want to take it? And I said, no, I told you I'd be here. And then I get home that night and I'm like, I need an answering service. I can't miss these opportunities because, yeah, they may not turn into anything, but those 3 are 3 more towards that next one that might turn into
A
something.
lot of letters for those 3.
Yes. Yep.
All right, anything else for Dan?
Can I ask
No.
you, actually, I'm sorry, I do
Yeah.
have one more thing. If someone were to get back to you on that, would you use an agent in that situation, or would you just go direct to your attorney and make it happen?
It depends. If they're ready to, so as an investor who's not an agent yet, that might be somewhere down the road for me, but I use the fact that an agent's going to charge a commission to get my price down a little bit more. Like, well, you can go to the market with it, and yeah, you might get that, but then you have to pay commissions and blah, 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 and, all these other fees and everything like that. So that's really the number you're going to be walking away with. So that's where I'm resetting that ceiling, that if you're only walking away with that, now let's negotiate off that. Because otherwise, they're negotiating off that big number that an agent would list it for, but they never put that in their pocket. And depending on how that conversation goes, I haven't had anyone yet turn to it, but obviously if somebody's like, no, I'm really not there and I want to go ahead and put this on the market, then at that point, if they haven't talked to an agent yet, then that's something I shuttle off to the network that I have in place. Because until I'm an agent, and even if I do go that route and become an agent, I don't necessarily want to be on that side of it. I just want to be able to get the information that I bother John for on a daily basis. Anything that's not published, I want to see it, MLS wise. And he's like, well, here's the documentation, disclosures, and whatever.
Right.
So it's painful.
Do you think it adds a level of liability, or does it kind of
As what?
add to be an agent
It
in this
does.
situation?
Yeah, you have to disclose.
You have to disclose it,
Yeah.
So as somebody who mails for personal reasons, it's an additional hurdle because one, the second that second that a seller finds out you're an agent, regardless of why you're emailing or reaching out to them, they don't want to talk to you. So there's that hurdle, and then there's disclosures that need to be on the mailings.
Interesting. Thank you.
Which is why I tried to get my wife to be named.
There you go.
Yeah, she's not playing the game. I tried to get her to be my property manager too. She's not playing that game either.
But it also opens up doors like you just mentioned. So if you're interested in buying it and they say, no, I really want top dollar, then there's a potential to convert it into a listing. So there's good and bad. There's good and bad.
Yeah. Potentially to find or speed type situation too, even if it's not for you.
Well, not if I'm not an agent.
But also like the question to him was like using an agent. And the good thing about having the right folks in your network is a good agent or a good friend who's an agent will help you through it. Like if you find yourself where you're like, wow, I might have found a deal. I don't really know how to navigate a real estate transaction by myself. And so you have a seller who doesn't know how to do that and a buyer who doesn't know how to do that. That can be hard.
Yes.
And so, at least in our experience, it's not binary. It's not like you use an agent or you don't. There's all sorts of middle ground there about how to consult or have somebody advise both parties through the process. So,
The other one, Brendan, is right of first refusal. So I'll put you in touch with an agent, we'll list it, we'll get you top market value, but I get the first. Like basically, you come to me with whatever the final one is, and then I get to decide whether I want to.
if you want to match or beat it.
Right. So you basically have an option on it at that point.
And some people like that. They're like, all right, I get fair market value, but you introduced me, so you get the first.
Right. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's a hard conversation. I mean, I actually had a seller call me, and I thought for sure he was very happy with the number that I gave him. We had been talking for about a week, 2 weeks now. He's actually one of the guys who called me when I was in Universal, and I called him back the next day, and I'm like, I'm sorry, blah, blah, blah. I'm away, and I'll call you back when I get into town. But he and I talked for about a week or two, and he explained the property that he had, gave me some information on it, and I got an offer together, and I made him a verbal. And he's like, that's a really good offer. You know what? I have this other property too I want to sell. And I was like, oh, sweet. Okay, give me the information. And he's like, yeah, let me talk to my brother, who's my partner on it. I'm like, okay. But he was so jazzed about the first offer, I thought, well, that's in the bag. I'm good there. And then I get him on the phone a couple days later about the other property. And at this point, he had already talked to his brother. And it was a 4-family in Lowell. And maybe like a day after I had that conversation with him, a 4-family in Lowell hit the market for, I think it was like $900,000. My offer was nowhere near $900,000 for this 4-family. And his brother thought for sure his 4-family was now worth $900,000. And I'm like, that's not how it works. That thing's like 2,000 square feet bigger than yours. But at that point I was just like, well, I've lost the 4-family. And I told him, I said, I can't make you an offer on the other property. Because honestly, I would love to take it from you. Like, I'd love to work something out for you, but if you're looking for top dollar, you are much better off putting that thing on the market. Because I can't make you a strong enough offer, especially if you don't like that offer. And your brother thinks that the 4-family is now worth $900,000. I said, I can't do right by you, so. And he appreciated that. It hurt, but he appreciated it. And I hope that when he decides he's going to sell the other property, he'll call me back when he realizes it's not worth $900,000. So.
Are you doing your own money?
What's that?
When you tell people that you're going to buy the properties, what are you doing for money?
Depending on the size of the deal, yeah, I mean, I'm leveraging HELOCs for the most part. When it comes to mindset, I had a cap on my own growth for this year. I told myself I was going to get 10 doors this year because I knew, based on what I had access to, that I could leverage that into about 10 doors. But then I got to the 6-family deal, and I realized that that's not going to get me where I want to get to. And actually, Gordon was the one who I told at the beginning of the year, I'm like, yeah, I have a goal of 10 doors. He's like, no, you have a goal of 40 doors. I'm like, you're out of your mind. I can't see the path to 40. He's like, yeah, but if you're shooting for 10, you're going to come up short. So I was like, all right. So I was shooting for 40. And then when I got that 6-family under agreement, I realized if I can partner on it now when I don't need to, then I'm putting myself in a better position for another deal that does come down. And I only told a few people about this 6-family deal. And it was the first time I've had any conversation with anybody about potentially coming in on a deal. And just from that conversation, I have one partner on this one, but 2 other guys are now like itching for get the next one. Like, I did the research, I looked at your numbers, and I feel good about that. Go out and get the next one so that I can partner with you on that. And that's a real confidence booster. When it comes down to, like, if you're working alone and just beating your head against the wall, having somebody else from the outside say, you know, I want to partner with you on the next one, makes you feel good, makes you keep motivated to go forward. So,
It's also a testament to the snowball effect that
Yes.
this space has, right?
100%.
It's like, you get to that 10 doors and new opportunities arise, more liquidity arises, like it starts to scale pretty quickly.
Yep.
If you want it to.
right.
Cool. Thank you, Jim. Very
Thank
much
you.
appreciated.